Hello and welcome to Three Inning Fan, our show. Today I have Dan Roberts. He is the guru of the business of sports. He's the editor-in-chief of Front Office Sports. He was with Yahoo Finance and Fortune Magazine. Dan, thank you so much for joining me today.
My pleasure. Looking forward to chatting.
Dan's got the business side, he's got the sports side, and Dan, it's an exciting time to be in the business of writing about the business of sports.
That's exactly right. You know, things are very good for us at FOS. I think that this maybe was a topic that years ago was seen as niche, and now it is not niche at all. I mean, constantly we see more interest than ever before. I think the average casual sports fan is more aware of business storylines than ever. And so it's a huge runway for us as kind of the lead media brand doing this. It's just, it's become a big beat. You know, I like to say almost every sports story now is also a business story. You know, whether it's not just player moves and contracts, the obvious stuff, but ratings and media rights deals and drama on and off the field, changes to the game, we'll get into that, the pitch clock, anything and everything has a very clear business angle to it.
It's so true. I mean, once you really start reading about the business of sports, and again, you should be following Dan on X, Read Dan Wright, like read and write, but Read Dan, so 2 Ds in a row, Read Dan Wright. Once you start reading about the business of sports, you realize that everything you see on the field is directly or indirectly the result of money.
100%. I mean, in a way, it might sound not disappointing or kind of not cheap, but I people, when you say that, I don't know if that removes some of the magic of it.
Right. It's a little less romantic, isn't it?
Yes, but it is the reality. These things are businesses. You know, I keep thinking of, I do my own interview series, Portfolio Players, and I had someone in who's a big sports deal maker. He has an advisory firm, and he worked on some of the most high-profile NFL and MLB team sales of the last 15 years. And I said to him, private equity is rushing in. You know, PE is coming in, investing in everything. And is there any downside there? Of course, we know what the downsides of PE are. I mean, usually it's like, hey, we want to flip this thing, so let's cut costs. Sometimes people are let go from companies. Anyway, I said, what would the downside be for fans? He said, well, if you're a fan, you should actually be pleased because it means more capital for your team and it means likely more growth and more investment opportunity. Now, of course, that's someone who's involved in this stuff saying it, but there is that angle of it that it's okay. It's not a bad thing. It's not evil, but they're businesses. So sorry, but I think you nail it. There's an angle at which it takes a little bit of the romance out of it. But sorry, guys aren't playing for the love of the game here. They may also love the game they play, but they're playing for the contracts and the money, and the owners are in it for the money, and it's a great return. It's a great investment to own a sports team.
And it works because as fans, we do get to enjoy it. And there's so many huge business stories happening right now. I mean, one that came down in the last week was this rumor that the Rays are finalizing the sale of their franchise this fall. And it kind of made me think a little bit about MLB valuations and also just the sale of MLB clubs because we have the Rays rumored to be being sold. The Twins have been on the market for some time. The Nationals have kind of been on the market, technically off the market right now, but you never know. The Orioles sold last year. And I'm kind of wondering, is this like an excess of supply of MLB clubs?
Well, okay, first of all, the whole reason that the big four, if you will, and sometimes if you want to ding hockey, you could say the big three, but you know, NFL, NBA, MLB, the reason these franchises are so valuable is scarcity. Now, yes, they've expanded or they've talked about expansion. Even MLB has talked about expansion. NHL is definitely going to expand over, if you want to be generous to Major League Soccer, you could say the Big Five and add MLS. MLS has expanded like crazy and the expansion fees have gone up. But still, it's a scarce asset. There's a finite number. Now and for many years, 30 MLB clubs, 32 NBA teams, 32 NFL. There's a finite number there. So it's funny to say that there's a glut or a big excess. However, I do think that every team is always for sale. Everything is always for sale. It's just, hey, you got an offer? There was a story a while back, months ago, and it said that Tampa Bay Lightning, maybe it was the Bucks. It was either the Bucks or the Lightning, one of those Tampa Bay teams, got an offer, so it must have been the Lightning, for $6 billion and turned it down. Maybe it was the Bucks, although every NFL team now is probably $7 or $8 billion. But it's like they were clearly dangling it out there in the media just to show we think we're worth more than $6 billion. they gave someone the scoop. It was like Tampa Bay turned down an offer. The news outlet didn't know who had made the offer, didn't have any details. And it's like, okay, the source is clearly Tampa Bay, putting it out there. Maybe they did get an offer like that. Maybe they made it up. But certainly owners will look at offers. I mentioned this series I do, Portfolio Players. One of my recent guests was Ted Leonsis. And any DC sports fan knows the Leonsis family. They own Monumental Sports and Entertainment. And he's a rare example of this portfolio of multiple teams. He owns the Capitals, NHL, the Wizards, NBA, although they just are terrible recently. They suck. And the Mystics, a WNBA team. And I asked him, what team would you want to own next? And he said, he confirmed, and this is widely known, that he is interested in buying the Nats. You mentioned the Nats. It's, maybe they're not officially for sale, but come on. But he also said, I'd love to own the Orioles. And it's like, well, wait a minute, the Orioles just sold. And he actually said, yeah, they sold to my friend David Rubenstein, but who knows? He goes, small market team, who knows what happens in the next 5 years? So that was like, oh, I mean, what was he hinting, that he'll just make an offer anyway in 4 years? And he said, I know Rubenstein. So point is, I think any team could sell at any time, whether or not the latest media buzz is that the team is on the block.
That's fascinating. And I'm interested in this idea of the scope of valuations for the different North American professional leagues. I mean, we heard about the sale of the Lakers for $10 billion.
A $10 billion valuation, yes.
At $6.1 billion for the Celtics. A couple of years ago, we saw the Commanders at $6 billion. And then you go over to MLB, and it looks a little bit like the 75% off sale rack with no returns allowed. Right? You got the Orioles sold a couple of years ago for around 1.7. 1.7 for the Rays.
Peanuts.
Yeah. $1 billion for the Royals a few years back. So what's going on with that? Why is that?
Well, so there's a lot here. And by the way, I love talking about this stuff. I mean, we could burn all our time talking about franchise sales and valuations. And the Lakers set a new record, but this is a little distinction here. The team didn't sell for a new $10 billion. It sold at a $10 billion valuation. The distinction there that everyone should understand is that it sold to Mark Walter, who was already a minority owner. He had already put some amount of money in. So it's just that the now new extra amount of money he's put in to buy the rest of the majority he didn't own values the team at $10 billion. So that's something people should understand when they see a headline. If you see a headline, it says the Lakers sold for $10 billion. That's not quite right. Sold at a $10 billion valuation. Anyway, it is a new high watermark for U.S. men's pro teams. I'm careful to say men's because there's also the women's leagues, and they're growing like crazy, and the expansion fees in the WNBA are up to $250 million. Crazy. It is a new record, and you look over at MLB, but maybe it's not fair to compare. I mean, MLB revenue is at like $12 billion. NFL is approaching that $20 billion mark, right? So, but over in the NFL, the 49ers recently sold a minority stake, and the sale of that minority stake valued that team at $8.6 billion. So in the order of recent events, you can check me on this, the Celtics sale news came out, by the way, still not final, but you're right on that number, $6.1 billion, and that was widely reported as, wow, this is a new record. This is a new high record. It was. Now, people missed, though, that only like 3 weeks later was the news of this 49ers minority stake that valued the 49ers at $8.6 billion. So technically, that was the new record. At least not record sale, but a record valuation for a U.S. pro team. And then, as you say, just a few weeks ago, the Lakers sale tops that at $10 billion. So to me, the most interesting question among all that, and we can dive into MLB, you're a baseball person, MLB versus the rest of the leagues. But even more interesting to me is there no ceiling on this? I mean, is it just going to go up, up, up forever? And your inclination is to say, no, it couldn't. There must be a ceiling. But I don't know. Why wouldn't there be? Because not just inflation, but again, and as a business journalist, I know it's the most basic thing is that there's no such thing as a guaranteed investment. No such thing as nothing's a sure thing. But man, owning one of those teams in the big three or big four or big five, or big four leagues is probably the closest thing you can get to a guaranteed investment, guaranteed to go up in value. I mean, if you manage to get a stake, whatever size, of an NBA, MLB, or NFL franchise, you can absolutely flip it just 2 years later for more money than you paid. Almost guaranteed, regardless of the team. And that's just what's interesting to me. So you want to talk MLB? I mean, when the Dodgers sold, that was $2 billion, right? And that was a new high at the time. Not just was it a new high for any league, but it was certainly a new high for MLB. And people said that was crazy. And when the Clippers sold for $2 billion, people said that was crazy. And now it hasn't been that long, less than a decade later, $10 billion. So the numbers become cartoonish at some point.
But the buy-in's kind of steep. Good investment, but a steep buy-in.
You got to have money to make money. And of course, once you buy, you're not done spending because then you got to put more money in. You got to get the best players. And I don't know, maybe a good segue to talk about the salary cap issue, but in baseball, you're just going to keep spending, right? I mean, Steve Cohen, whatever he bought the Dodgers for, I don't remember off the top of my head. But
the Mets, yeah.
I'm sorry, the Mets. He's put more in since then. You just keep spending.
There you have it, folks. Do not spend your last $8 billion on the franchise because you're going to need a little bit extra. So let's talk about the impact of the salary cap on the valuations. We don't have a salary cap in Major League Baseball. Of course, it's going to be a huge topic next year when baseball goes to renegotiate its collective bargaining agreement, what we call the CBA. The current one expires December 1, 2026, and then all heck might break loose. We don't know if there's going to be a work stoppage. We don't know if Manfred's going to go in hard for a salary cap and what the impact of that is going to be. So who's got more to lose here, the players or the owners?
Probably the owners, but it's close. As we always talk about with a possible lockout, depends on the player, right? Some of these guys can hold out and they're fine and their wallets will be fine. But some of these guys making the lowest number possible, they want to play. They want baseball to happen. I remember the last either lockout or near lockout, and these things come in cycles. And depending on who you ask, it's almost certainly headed for a lockout. I think it could be an epic standoff. Tony Clark and the Players Association, they're pretty difficult. They're pretty staunch. Manfred, as you said, has dangled this possibility of a salary cap, and that's not something that we see in baseball. And there's a reason that certain teams are able to have all the best players. And I feel like for years, people just kind of accept that. They may bitch and moan about it, but that's the reality. Like the Dodgers and to an extent the Red Sox and Fenway Sports Group, and now Stevie Cohen and the Mets, they just get all the best players because they can spend the most. And that has seemed to the average fan not quite fair. On the other hand, that's how the business is designed. Too bad. I mean, the way I heard a friend put it recently was unless they put a salary cap in, you're never going to have another Hall of Famer who played for the Pittsburgh Pirates. That's just a random example. Now, of course, right now, as I say that, you could say, what about Paul Skeens? But they're going to lose him at some point. I mean, in some sense, you can understand why this keeps coming up. I think it was a surprise that Manfred even kind of dangled as a possibility. But yeah, you're gonna see a major standoff here. And it's going to be dramatic. It's going to be interesting. And these things always start so early. In other words, let's make sure all the viewers understand. The current CBA doesn't expire until not just the end of this season, the end of next season. So we've got still a whole additional season after this season where things should be fine, but everything pulls forward. I mean, here we are talking about it. We'll see the drama. I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen. I mean, if you just ask me as a fan, there should be a salary cap. There should be more equity, there should be more parity, I should say, among the teams. Now, I'm from Boston, and so John Henry and the FSG group owning the Red Sox has been very good for me. Right now right now they don't suck, actually. They just won 10 games in a row. I don't think anyone thinks this year's Sox are going to
they're back in it.
They're in it. I don't think anyone thinks this year's Red Sox are going to make a deep playoff run, but I hope I'm wrong, knock on wood. But certainly in the last 15 years, it's been great. I mean, it's great to be owned by people who are richer than the other owners, So we'll see. We'll see. It's going to be certainly very dramatic. And by the way, we should mention here, when you talk about these negotiations, you well know as a lawyer, I mean, all these commissioners are usually lawyers. They're trained, and what they really are is negotiators. And I think that if Manfred was kind of hated at the beginning, well, he was. And by the way, it's the job of all the commissioners they work for the owners. Let's remember that. And they're always hated by fans, and they're basically a shield for the owners. Look at Goodell. But all that matters is, are they doing things right for the owners, and are they making more money for the owners? And yet, the changes that he has overseen to the game have worked. I mean, objectively, they've worked. Pitch clock and the intentional walking, and the games are going faster, and attendance is up, and ticket sales are up. So I mention that because I think that might help things as they negotiate. I think Manfred has racked up some recent wins.
You mean it might help with the players' union? Like he represents a little bit of a rejuvenation of the game, even if they have nothing good to say about him?
I'm sure that there are baseball nuts who are better schooled than I who would say, oh, you're wrong. They all absolutely hate him. But he recently has had some good PR wins. And you would think that that's going to come into play. In other words, it gives him some more credibility. No one can say, ugh, he's a terrible commissioner. He's terrible. Other than maybe like extreme purists, I don't know, the Mike Francesa's of the world who think like they're ruining baseball with all these changes. You know, I saw someone, as we record this, you know, I know sometimes it takes a while for things to get out. As we record this, we just had the All-Star game. And first, the home run derby was decided by like half an inch or whatever it was by Hawkeye. And then the very next night, All-Star game goes into this sudden death swing-off, you know, home run contest, which is a new format that resulted from labor discussions in 2022. They hadn't ever had to do it yet. And I think a lot of people thought that was very cool. I am getting back to my point here, which is the reason I bring this up. I think it was Francesa just the other day who said, oh, watch out. You know what you'll see next is MLB will say that every tied game needs to be determined this way. And you can groan and say, oh, they'll never do that. But it would be more fun. Fans would love that. I mean, I'm not even sure I see the problem. But there's always purists who don't like things that, you know, ruin the sanctity of the game. Remember the golden at bat that was floated?
Oh my God, did I rail on that? I hated it.
And some prominent pitcher, it might have even been Clemens, or CC, someone tweeted and was like, if you get a golden at bat, then I want a golden pitch where you can take your ace who didn't pitch this game and bring them up just to pitch to this one batter. And everyone laughed, but it's like, well, maybe. I mean, I guess my point is, I'm not sure that there's anything that you should dismiss out of hand in terms of changes to the game. And I think Manfred has gained some extra credibility because the pitch clock has worked.
He's really thought outside the box on a lot of those things. And when we said at the beginning that what we see on the field is indirectly or directly a result of money, I mean, you have things like the pitch clock or the limited pitching disengagements, all that stuff that's made for a faster game. That's the game we're looking at. But it has also resulted in increased ticket sales and attendance, at least from what I've read.
That's all up. You know, I could pull up our stories from our great baseball writer, Eric Fisher, and cite the numbers, but, you know, some number 7 or 8 year highs for ticket sales and attendance. I mean, they're filling ballparks again, which is great. And just in a sort of general sense, you know, I've been covering the business of sports since 2010. And for years, I felt like the narrative, and there's always narratives, you know, and there were people saying, oh, baseball's dead. Well, obviously, that was always stupid. Baseball was never dead. And if you ask me, it's the best sport, you know. I've actually recently become a little bit of a hockey convert just in one sense, which is that I now think maybe NHL is the best sport to see live, to go to a game, if and only if you have terrific seats. If you're right there by center ice, incredible. But terrible to watch on TV, in my view, NHL. But baseball to me is the best sport. So for years, people said baseball's dead. Obviously, that was stupid and wrong. It was never dead. However, it is certainly true that for years, the narrative when you talked about the big U.S. leagues was NFL is the juggernaut. At some point, the NFL replaced baseball as America's pastime. You know, people say baseball is not America's pastime. It hasn't been America's pastime for years. It's the NFL. You know, America and the NFL. And it's true. The NFL's growth financially, eyeballs, everything just seems completely unstoppable. And then even there was a little bit of a sense that the NBA was number 2, that MLB had slipped to number 3. And, you know, this could be a whole separate show debating this. People can pull out their numbers. But some baseball people will tell you, well, that was actually never true. That's not true. And it's because it's not quite apples to apples. We'll get into the media. But the media rights, the media deals are totally different. MLB is so localized as a business, not just with gate receipts and ticket sales, but also the RSNs, the dreaded RSNs, the regional sports networks. And, you know, the NBA signs this new mega $77 billion rights deal, and they kicked out TNT. They went with Amazon. But point is, for years, MLB was seen as slipping, rapidly slipping, being in decline. And I remember for years when I was at Yahoo Finance, that was sort of the peak of this. Every year it was like, MLB ratings drop another X%. Oh, my God. And it was like, what are they going to do? Meanwhile, NHL ratings were down 7% this year. No one questions existentially, is the NHL going to keep existing? All these things make tons of money, these leagues. But when you do the comparison game, which is always hard to avoid, depending on your view, MLB is either number 2 or number 3. And yet, that has changed in recent years, or at least the narrative has shifted. And I keep saying, baseball's back, baby. I mean, the business of baseball is back. There was a great recent cover on this. It was either Variety or, you know, some magazine. It was something you wouldn't expect, like not a sports outlet. I think it was media. And it was just a great kind of mashup cover on like the business of baseball is booming. It's back. And it's thanks to, I think, a number of factors. The Dodgers have helped. Having mega stars back helps. I mean, the whole face of baseball thing, that was another debate for years that they didn't have any stars, no national stars. Now you got Judge and Ohtani, and they're on the coasts. They're playing for the two biggest teams. Couldn't be better. So MLB needs to make hay while the sun shines.
Yeah, this concept of marketable stars. I mean, we think about them as the best players in the game, but what baseball really needs are poster boys. And they do have two, and Otani and Judge. And I'll be a little bit cynical here. I think they kind of want one in Cal Raleigh, the big dumper, because did you notice in the home run derby, he magically won that first round by like this much, which is incredible to be
It's
able to
controversial.
measure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I was surprised. We wrote a great story on this at FOS. Actually, it was one of our summer interns talked to like a data scientist about can the tech really measure within with certainty within 1 inch, and the answer is that it was actually within the margin of error. You know, the amount that he beat Rooker, but it was like within the margin of error. So a little bit of controversy there, but I was surprised more reporters weren't more skeptical about that. They just took it as fact, like, oh, well, Hawkeye says. But you're right. I mean, the league is pushing around. Look, you could point to a couple of different stars. Bobby Witt Jr., you know, I'm a big Mookie guy. To me, that was the worst loss of the last 5 years for Boston. So, you know, either that or Marcus Smart from the Celtics. I mean, guys just who were beloved, and it killed me. It killed me to see Mookie Betts go to the Dodgers. But I'll tell you, and I was about to say I'll push back a little bit. It's not even push back. I have a little bit of a take, which is that even Aaron Judge isn't that famous. I got to tell you, and I'm not blaming the league for that. In other words, for years when it was like there's no face, or people try to say the biggest star in baseball is Mike Trout, and Mike Trout is not like. And I mean, you wouldn't recognize him on the street. Maybe someone could say, sure you would, beefy guy. Like, no. I mean, my mom would not, recognize Mike Trout on the street, and she wouldn't recognize Aaron Judge for that matter either. Now you can say, well, it's because it's regional, you're from Boston. She knows David Ortiz. She knows Pedro Martinez. She knows those guys. So and Aaron Judge is at least huge and tall, and people I think see him and they're like, oh, that's a professional athlete. But my point is, even now when we say, oh, things are great, and we've got Judge and Ohtani, I still think those are not stars on the level. I mean, they're just the biggest stars, and they're not like the biggest stars in basketball. And then, of course, if you look at football, sure, you got your quarterbacks and your Josh Allen, Tom Brady, and Lamar Jackson. But for the most part, people like to say, these experts always say, the problem in football is they're wearing helmets. You can't see their faces. Mm-hmm. So it's hard. It's hard for them to be recognizable. So with all that said, again, it's not baseball's fault. I think baseball's done a lot right. And you can only use the stars you're given, but it's certainly true that for years there was no one. I mean, don't try to tell me Mike Trout was the face of baseball. And I used to love, and I still love doing who's the face of baseball. And I think for years, even after Jeter retired, you could say it was still Derek Jeter. And I'm a Red Sox fan saying that. Mm-hmm. So now, is it Ohtani? Probably, because he's like the second coming of Babe Ruth, and the Japan fan base that's so good for baseball. I don't think it's Aaron Judge. I just think he's regional. I think he's big in New York. I'm not sure he's nationally recognized.
Fascinating, really interesting. And so you mentioned media, and MLB is actually in a super interesting position right now with respect to media. They've got ESPN maybe ditched, but maybe they're going back to the table. And then you've got Rob Manfred wanting to just restructure the whole media situation.
It's a mess. I think it's been a mess for a long time. Again, I remember covering very closely the RSNs, the regional sports networks, changing hands. Most of those were owned by Fox way back when. I hope I'll get this right. It was such a meandering, Disney acquired 21st Century Fox. Disney bought Fox. It was a huge, huge, huge acquisition maybe 8-9 years ago. Disney was on a hot streak, bought Marvel, bought Pixar, bought Lucasfilm. Everything was working. Bob Iger, incredible run. And the DOJ or antitrust regulators, whoever in the government said, well, actually, okay, we'll approve this. Disney buys Fox, except you immediately must shed the RSNs, to satisfy monopoly rules. And it was like, of all things. And that was when suddenly the average consumer, I think, became aware of these RSNs and how the business works. So Disney had to immediately sell off those RSNs. And then they changed hands multiple times in 3 or 4 years. They went to Bally, and that thing went under. They went to Diamond Sports Group, and then Diamond filed for bankruptcy 2 years ago and to emerge from bankruptcy. And Diamond renamed itself Main Street Sports or something.
Right, yeah. And that's part of the restructuring,
yeah. And now where are we today? Well, they've been rebranded to FanDuel. They're called FanDuel, even though FanDuel doesn't own them, but FanDuel bought the naming rights. And so I think Manfred could cement his legacy if he just brings the media rights back under the league umbrella. I mean, again, I talked about this earlier, but the reason it's hard to compare both the success and the financial revenue and the ranking of MLB to NBA to NFL is because the other leagues have pretty simple, clear national media rights deals. You know, the NFL has Fox, CBS, Disney, ESPN. You know, and it doesn't mess with, well, it's messing with streamers more and more, but for little one-offs, you know, Netflix Christmas games, they gave Thursday Night Football to Amazon, and then even Peacock got one, but that's because it's NBC. You know, NBA has a new media rights deal coming up, and they went with, you know, NBC. NBC is going to be back in the NBA business, going to be really interesting and exciting for them, and they ditched TNT, going to Amazon. Wow. And then you do MLB, and it's like not easy to describe and summarize because it's like, well, these 6 teams, their games are only on their local regional network. And for as bad a business as the RSNs are, they still hang around because if you're a local fan of some local team, you got to have the local network.
You do.
You know, you better have SNY or you better have NESN in Boston or MSG Network to watch the Knicks. And it's a mess. And the different networks, some of them don't do as well, but again, you need them. Some of them have a nice app that makes it easy to watch. Some of them don't, and the tech sucks. So long story short, to bring it back to MLB in its current media state, you know, it was a real shock when suddenly, 2 years early, ESPN and MLB divorced like 2 months ago. You know, and that's it. Like, it's the end of Sunday Night Baseball, and it's the end of an era. ESPN, I think, also shed a number of baseball talents. It was like, oh my God. And they both had a war of words. Manfred said something like, we didn't realize how small ESPN, or something like ESPN's viewership is declining rapidly, which it is on linear, but that's because linear television viewership is declining. And then Pitaro said something about we don't need baseball, or so they flung some mud. But our media guys had some scoopage, and they were saying, we're hearing actually that it might not be the end, and maybe they can come back together. And now fast forward to just 3 days ago. At MLB All-Star Game, Manfred
Did we see them on the Jumbotron together?
Oh, that would be pretty good. You know, you joke about the Coldplay Boston Gillette issue, but actually, in seriousness, there have been some examples where 2 executives are seen sitting together, and it's like, oh, that's going to be the new media deal. Who was recently seen? It was like Mark Lazarus, the NBC chairman, was sitting with Silver somewhere, and then sure enough, NBC. So anyway, we just heard from Manfred, who basically confirmed that the new media deal, the bidders are NBC, Apple, and ESPN.
How about that?
Wait a minute. ESPN is bidding. Okay. So what might that look like? It would be totally reworked, you know, because we know that ESPN wasn't happy, right? So ESPN, maybe it looks more localized. Maybe ESPN gets some of the RSNs. But again, well, that's why I brought up the whole history with the RSNs, the whole sordid ownership history. Well, I thought that it's, you know, anti-competitive and monopolistic for ESPN, which is owned by Disney, to own these RSNs, right? So I don't know what it'll look like. And then you throw Apple into the mix. Apple's a real thorny issue. You know, Apple and MLS struck a big deal, and basically, universally, people think it's been a disaster. You know, if you're a soccer fan and you don't get Apple TV, now you can't watch MLS, so you have to pay for Apple TV. On the other hand, that's where the business is going. You know, it's to the highest bidder. Right? So why shouldn't the leagues get the most money they possibly can? F1 is rumored to be going to Apple. But most people, media watchers, fans think that it sucks for any live sports rights to be exclusive to Apple TV. You know, because they think that sucks. I have to pay for another premium streaming service. So we'll see what Apple gets. Apple already has, Sunday Night Baseball for now? They have something.
They do a lot of Friday night games.
Friday night,
yeah.
Thank you. Apple has Friday Night Baseball. So is Apple going to get more? What's NBC going to get? But the big picture goal here is make it less localized. I don't think he can yet do, it would take years, what he really wants, which is bring all the regional stuff under MLB control.
It's going to be hard to
get
get
rid
the
of all
big
those RSNs.
media markets to do that, the Yankees-size clubs to want to do that.
And by the way, those clubs that own the network, that's a huge asset. I mean, you know, when Mark Cuban sold his majority stake to the Adelsons in the Dallas Mavs, and he's down to like 27%, he claimed, I don't know, but I'll take him at his word. He claimed the reasoning there was that he sees that in sports franchise ownership now, it's all about real estate. The next way to raise the value of your franchises, you got to own the arena, you got to own the network, you got to own the real estate, you got to build casinos or hotels around the arena. And he said, and I'm not a real estate guy. That's not my business. I don't know and understand that stuff. So I sold the majority to a family that does that for a living, and they're the experts. And now that hasn't gone so well with, Dallas unloaded Luka, and people got their conspiracy theories. And the conspiracy theory is that they want to move the team to Vegas if they can't get approval to build a casino in Dallas. But my point here is, like, you're totally right that you've got to mention those teams that own their network, and they're not going to let go of that because it's a huge asset. I mean, look at Fenway Sports Group,
So I have a question for you, and I don't know if you're going to know the answer to this because I don't know the answer to it, but I know that the revenue sharing in Major League Baseball is under the rubric of collective bargaining, so it's something that's got to be part of that CBA negotiation. Do these deals, like whoever Manfred decides to go with, Apple or ESPN or whoever, is that also subject to collective bargaining, or can he make that decision on his own?
As I understand it, it's all part of the CBA. Now, I don't think you have to involve players in that. The teams get to share in that media revenue, but of course, the reason that it's so staggered and some teams make more money is because it's so localized. You've got merch sales, and the Yankees and Dodgers sell the most. You've got the network. You've got gate receipts, and teams that make more money from gate receipts, right? So that's why it's all over the map, and it's not equal revenue. But I'm not exactly sure whether the CBA covers the media deal. I kind of think it covers everything or close to everything. But certainly, it behooves the owners to go with the highest bidder. I mean, look at the NBA, right? The NBA ditched TNT, and people thought, end of an era in favor of Amazon. I was interviewing Mark Lazarus, the chairman of NBC Universal, at our summit last fall, our media summit. And I said to him, as you look around, streamers are really crowding into the room for live rights. Netflix, Amazon, now Apple. And doesn't that concern you? And he said, well, we still think that because we are a network and we're broadcast, we have a big advantage over streamers because all they have is the streaming service. They're, over tech companies. I'm not so sure that's true anymore. I mean, God bless them. It's a nice thought. But I think that the way things are headed, leagues, when they renegotiate their media rights deals, just go with the highest bidder. And the highest bidder is these tech giants that have oodles of endless money. So I think you're going to see more rights go to Amazon, Netflix, and Apple.
That's just wild. There's just so much going on right now on the business side of things, and we're so happy to have here with us today Dan Roberts, the editor-in-chief of Front Office Sports. So I just want to throw in one little plug for you. You did a great article a couple weeks ago, and it's not baseball. It was about soccer, and it was actually about American stars, celebrities, buying into soccer clubs because they were a little cheaper. Can you tell us a little bit about that piece?
Yeah, well, and first of all, where I start with this stuff is that right now everyone wants to own a piece of a sports team. And you could say, well, that's not a new phenomenon. Sure. I mean, it's not like it was ever a secret that owning a piece of a sports team is a great investment. But the trend has dramatically accelerated in the last 2 or 3 years. Especially, I'm not talking about the people buying a whole team. That was, rich people buy teams, fine. Steve Cohen. I'm talking about former pro athletes and also now lately even current still playing pro athletes, WNBA players, and then also actors, Hollywood types, David Beckham, Will Ferrell, Eva Longoria. They all suddenly want to own a small stake in a pro sports team. And yes, it's because it's a great investment. It's obvious. But also, there's glitz and glam in this, There's a certain marquee kind of sheen. There's cachet in being in the owner's suite and in going to the games and being seen as the face of a group. I mean, how often do you see that they say a certain group is bidding and the group is led by, and it's like insert athlete or actor here. Well, the athlete or actor doesn't have the money. I mean, it's like the Jeter Marlins thing. Jeter didn't have $2 billion. So they're the face of it. It's good for the individual, it's good for the celebrity, and it's also good for the group. So with all that said, that's just a larger, big picture phenomenon that's happening. WNBA players being involved in groups buying NWSL teams, all that good stuff. But it's especially happening in soccer. And it's especially happening in European soccer overseas. Now, yes, MLS as well. I mentioned David Beckham. I mentioned Will Ferrell. All these guys have a piece of an MLS team. But it's really happening overseas in football, if you will. And there's a few reasons for that. One, you got a lot more teams to choose from. You got endless teams. I mean, I just spent a week in the countryside in England. We were in the Cotswolds as a vacation. And you're driving through these towns. Every town, there's a soccer pitch, and it says, the little Bromley Football Club, LBFC. Everything is FC. Every town has its team. Now, some of these are tiny, no-name little low-tier clubs, but that's what Wrexham was. And Rob, McElhaney and Ryan Reynolds came in, bought that team. They've been promoted 3 years in a row. Now, you're doing a baseball show, so let's define our terms here. In soccer, there's relegation.
Mm-hmm.
If you suck too bad, you literally get booted down to the tier below you.
I learned that from Ted
amazing.
Lasso.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Yeah.
I mean, and by the way, that creates an added risk of investment. So unlike in the U.S., where in the U.S. leagues, if you're really bad, they reward you with the highest draft pick.
Right.
Because they want parity. They
and
want
revenue
parity.
sharing.
Which, by the way, not to be a big Boston guy, but that's why what the Patriots did was so incredible and impressive. Okay, does everyone understand that? All the New Yorkers?
Boy.
Because it's a league designed to not have a team be the best team every single year, and they did it anyway. So anyway.
I'd like to apologize to all my Yankee followers for having this man on.
In soccer and football, you can go buy a team and you have the risk that you get relegated. And we talked earlier about, your spend isn't done when you acquire the team. Then you got to spend more. So now you're spending more to get back. Promotion is the opposite, where you are so good that you get to rise a level. And try and wrap your head around this. Ryan Reynolds and Rob McElhaney come in and buy this, third-tier team, Wrexham, and they've been promoted. They've graduated to the next league 3 seasons in a row. Incredible. And now they're only 1 tier away from the Premier League.
Wow, that's incredible.
Incredible. So with all that said, they're just one example, but I do think that the show, Welcome to Wrexham, the streaming docuseries, every sport now needs its streaming docuseries, whether it's Drive to Survive, F1, Full Swing, soccer, golf, or quarterback, NFL. Everyone is doing the streaming docuseries thing. I think Wrexham was hugely influential. And now Eva Longoria, who also is an investor in Wrexham, has a show coming out about Necaxa, which is a Mexican soccer team. And the guy who owns that, who I recently interviewed, his name is Sam Porter. He co-owns it with someone else, Al Tillis. Eva Longoria, Reynolds, and McElhaney are also minority investors in Necaxa. So now the Necaxa show is coming out on Hulu. It debuts in like a month. And they're hoping that can be the next Wrexham.
I would think so. You got a
Eva
beautiful
Longoria.
star. Yeah.
Yeah. Now, will Americans be as interested in the tales of a Mexican soccer team? Why not? I think maybe. But it's hard to have lightning strike twice. Could it be as big a hit as Wrexham? I don't know. But these American investors coming in, it means more money. And that means more spending. And that means better players. And by the way, you want to talk about no salary cap? Soccer, another Wild West. Spend whatever you want, baby. Man U and Arsenal, and the rich stay richer, and the best teams just get better because they spend the most on the player. I mean, the transfer window in soccer, the amounts of money that these guys are paid, it's just mind-blowing. So long answer. But that's what's happening with soccer, and I do think it's really interesting. There's more teams, so it's easier to get a team, and there's lower buy-in. You can't go just buy an NFL team if you're an actor. But hey, you got $2 million to put in to buy a small-tier soccer team? Yeah.
Okay, well, so let's just bring this back to baseball for a minute. You said there's more supply, there are more teams, and it's cheaper. Could we ever see the same kind of celebrity status for purchasing a minor league baseball team?
Well, it's funny you ask. I mean, I love the minors. I did a story years ago on Brandiose, which is the branding company that does all of the logos and mascots, these crazy things you see. Of course, now on the spot, I can think of one. The Hartford Yard Goats was a good example.
Oh, yeah.
They were previously the New Britain Rock Cats, and then they did Dunkin' Donuts Park. My wife works at ESPN, and all the Yard Goats games is all ESPN employees. I mean, it's like they've adopted the team. But it's a great experience, fun team. They got the goat logo, like the hats are great. And so I think the minors are really fun. It's not a great business, I mean, these teams just do not make money mostly. But boy, is it fun as long as they're around. We used to go see the Newark Bears, and that's a sad story. The Newark Bears were a minor league team that was family owned, and I went to a few games. And I think in the 2010s, 2011, 2012, 2013, Times did a story on this, but the team went under. Team just they sell or they close, or there's no team there anymore. I don't know what they're called now, but it's a tough business. Most of these things are not profitable, and I think MLB has tried to help with the minors. So we haven't really seen an example of that. But sure, again, if you're a celebrity and you want to get into sports ownership, I also think what's happening is everyone, I keep saying this, this is my new motto. everyone right now wants to own a piece of a sports team, any sports team. So if you can start in the minors, fine. Or if you can start in European soccer, if you can start in Mexican soccer, whatever, everyone wants to say, I'm a sports owner.
I kind of like it. I like the status. I like the celebrity. I think it sounds kind of fun.
Yeah. I mean, look, in pro baseball, Jeter was sort of the example. Now, he was a baseball player, but I mean, that's still my go-to of like celebrity ownership group where he was the face of it. But again, he wasn't the money, Now, of course, it didn't go very well, the Jeter Marlins stint.
All right. Well, that's true. Yeah, it ended up they went their separate ways, and the Marlins are their own story for the moment
Fire
because
sale,
they're
got rid of all the best players. It didn't go well. But I think it's exciting, and it's like I said, it's close to a sure thing. Not in minor league baseball, but MLB, NBA, NFL. It's a great business to be in.
Love it. Well, Dan, I've already put you on the hot seat enough, but it's about to get worse. Are you ready?
Hey, okay.
Okay. So we close every podcast here at 3 Inning Fan with what's good to eat while watching the ball game, because food is very important. Dan, what do you like to eat while you're watching the ball game?
Okay. The simplest answer I can give you for the social media clip is chicken fingers. My wife and I were chicken fingers people. That doesn't mean to the exclusion of hot dogs.
Are you secretly 12 years old?
I know, and it's not as convenient as a dog. You get a hot dog, that's it, one hand. You get the chicken fingers, there's usually fries, never enough, and then you got to carry them back to the seat, and it's kind of messy. It's not as convenient.
Yeah.
But we're chicken finger people. Maybe often a dog as well. We'll split a dog and chicken fingers, but chicken fingers first. Love chicken tenders. But I have some complaints here. First of all, usually they don't give you enough. They give you like 3 chicken tenders. It's a scam.
Right?
And there's nowhere more expensive and scammy than Yankee Stadium.
Really?
In terms of the prices
I
and the amount of food you get.
This is a Boston Red Sox fan.
But it's the truth. And a beer
even say
is like
something
$18.
nice about the chicken fingers at Yankee Stadium.
I can't. Well, I will say one nice thing, which is, you go to Citi Field and the amount of ads, it's almost like a holdover from the Wilpon era. I mean, the ridiculous amount of overlapping ads. Everywhere you look, you can't escape an ad because they needed it, So Yankee Stadium is very obviously a more premium experience. But I believe that the last time I was at a Yankees game, I got a beer and it was like $19. It's criminal.
Well, that is a bummer, but I am not sure that Fenway is a whole lot better, but okay.
Yep, that's probably right.
But I've seen those chicken tender buckets are big. That's not enough for you? Or are you just getting the child size one?
I don't think I ever get the bucket. We just get the regular. It's usually in a paper tray, and it's usually like a meager 3 chicken tenders. They distract you by piling on the fries, but there's not enough chicken tenders. And I have one more baseball food take. It'll never get as good as the first beer. The first sip of the first beer. So you arrive, you got to get a beer. You get a cold beer. You're probably going to have 2 more. They're not going to be as good. It's never as good as that first beer.
Well, I kind of feel that way on a Friday night when I get home and pour a cocktail. That first sip is a little magical.
Sure, or a glass of wine from Franco's in
There
New Canaan,
you
Connecticut.
have it, in Franco's Wine Merchants right here in New Canaan, Connecticut. Dan, thank you so much for joining us today. Folks, follow Dan Roberts. He's the editor-in-chief of Front Office Sports. Follow Front Office Sports. Dan, thanks so much for joining us. And listeners, we'll see you next time.